Hi guys, my name is Philip. I'm 17 and I live in the UK. Because I'm not yet 18, it means this. I don't actually have a say in the upcoming decision about whether the UK stays in the EU or leaves. But most of you will, and the decision that you make, for better or for worse, will determine the country that I and millions of other young people grow up in. I, like most young people under 24, want Britain to stay in the EU. In this video I will explain why, looking at 3 of the main reasons. And in next week's video I will look at 3 myths surrounding Brexit. The first reason to stay in the EU is because being in the EU strengthens the British economy. The G7, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Oxford, the IMF, the Treasury and the Bank of England, along with 88% of economists, all agree the British economy is stronger in Europe. Why? Well, in the short term, leaving the EU would create a period of uncertainty, during which investment would leave the UK and the value of the pound would fall. This period of uncertainty is likely to last years, until Britain is able to renegotiate its trade deals with Europe and with 53 other nations that being in the EU gives us free trade with. Even Brexit campaigners recognise the benefits of free trade to the British economy. Free trade increases competition, which drives down prices, while it also increases specialisation, and a lack of tariffs helps protect British jobs and business. However, the EU won't give as good a trade deal without us making any contribution to the EU. Why? Because to do so would make EU membership worthless. The EU is also currently negotiating free trade deals with India and China, and so leaving the EU would mean that we'd miss out opportunities to develop our economies with these emerging markets. This is not scaremongering. It is a calculated assessment by the world's top economists on the risks that leaving the EU poses to Britain. The second reason to stay in the EU is because being in the EU amplifies Britain's voice in the world. The presidents of China and America, the prime ministers of Canada, Japan, India and Australia, along with our friends in the EU, are all telling us they can work with us better if we're in the EU. This is because being in the EU not only helps us shape European policy, but also worldwide policy. For example, it was EU-led sanctions against Iran that helped to deliver the Iranian nuclear programme, while EU sanctions against Russia have helped to de-escalate fighting in Ukraine. Of course, Britain could continue to implement sanctions in a post-Brexit world, but we'd increasingly find ourselves following the lead of Brussels rather than shaping policy ourselves. Furthermore, it's a lot easier for countries to weasel their way out of trouble if they can negotiate with lots of countries individually, rather than facing the force of collective action. The third reason to stay in the EU is because the EU allows us to better tackle climate change. Pollution doesn't recognise borders, and therefore the best response to climate change is one in which countries work together. We now have greener energy because of EU energy targets, we have more energy efficient devices because of EU legislation, and our most vulnerable species have been protected because of EU nature directives. The EU has protected our bees by banning harmful pesticides, and it has protected our beaches by stopping us from pumping sewerage into the sea. We even recycle more because of EU recycling targets, and the EU has stopped us from sending toxic chemicals to landfill. Those leaving the EU aren't talking much about climate change, and it's because many of them, like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, are deeply sceptical that it even exists. But if we fail to tackle this problem, it will leave whole nations submerged, whole industries destroyed, and whole species extinct. I hope that on the 23rd of June, you vote for the millions of young people who can't vote at this election. Vote for our jobs. vote for our influence, and vote for our planet. Thank you.